formally acknowledged country, the many and various countries in which we all meet today, and there's hundreds of us here watching. So to the elders past and present, traditional owners, we pay respects to you, and particularly with regard to our emerging leaders, particularly in Western Sydney, the largest single urban Indigenous population in Australia. Also to our traditional sponsors in Deloitte and Western Sydney Uni, thank you for your support. This is our first foray of a future forum online, so the future is here and it appears to be online. Minister, chance to have a chat to you, and we've offered through the Q&A button our viewers to join in that debate later on after we chat to you in a little response panel, or use the Twitter @FutureForum tag. Let's start with you in terms of today's news. The steel spine, the Western Metro EIS has been tabled. The hot news in Western Sydney, while we're very supportive of the train and very keen for that 20-minute trip, let's deal with the elephant in the room early on. Rydalmere didn't get a look in, or Camellia, its partner across the river. It seemed a tough engineering gig once you chose stabling at Clyde. That was always going to be tougher to get up to Rydalmere and across. So recognising that engineering issue, and I'm sure Barney's had a few things to say and might come back to it because the university will agree, understandably there. Are you fearful at all that we learnt the hard way with Alexandria, that we didn't at least provision for the future when maybe a station somewhere in Camellia or Rydalmere might have been used later on?
Look, thanks, Chris, and thanks for having me. And again, I mean, well done on the dialogue for actually having today. Look, the bottom line is you can't be all things to all people, and the reality is that this train line is not designed to stop at all places between Parramatta and the city. It's designed to replicate the Western Sydney T1 line, which will be at extreme capacity in the early 2030s. It's designed to be, in many ways, the first stage of the connection directly to Western Sydney Airport. And at the same time, the more stops you put in, the longer it takes to travel between the city and Parramatta, which is part of this. So it's not simply a train line for those who live between Parramatta and the city. It's a train line that serves 3 million people of Western Sydney. So for us, ultimately there had to be some tough calls, acknowledging, obviously those interests that were, very keen for, Rydalmere, Camellia and what have you. But, the bottom line is that we want to be around that 20-minute journey time. This is a very big project. It's a very expensive project. It's the project of the 2020s. I mean, it's going to be a 10-year build. We are in the market with the tunnelling very soon. And we want to have those TBMs back in the ground come 2022. So, ultimately the EIS is out there for people to give their input. I'd encourage people, if they've got views on those stations, to obviously continue to put forward their viewpoints through the EIS process and directly to government. But that's the purpose of the bill.
Now, most of the community interest outside the heavy and highly disturbed group of engineering students and practitioners is about the bit above ground. The concept of metros being more of an urban renewal vehicle than a lot of normal transport is. We're in a tough time financially between bushfires, drought, COVID-19. There's a huge call on public sector funding. Does this circumstance accelerate, combined with, I think, the government's move now with Peter Arkestraat, the Productivity Commissioner, for planning to finally get with sort of a value capture approach? Does this accelerate the opportunity for more private sector partnership above ground, above those metro stations, as part of urban renewal?
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality is we're going to wake up from the COVID crisis and find ourselves in recession. And it's very sad to think that, as a nation, we were humming along incredibly well. I think that the thing for us, though, is, and I've made this clear, which is, all along, I've held the belief that we can get on with our projects through the pandemic, and to accelerate jobs post-pandemic, the best utilisation of taxpayer dollars would be to go into construction sites and keep the economy flowing through the construction sector.
It's a very Bradfield, Lang-esque approach, isn't it? Not only the economic impact of those projects on a recovering economy, but the confidence hit it gives the community to know that we are still going ahead. There is still life the other side of the bridge.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you take the Metro City project, and when we've actually trying to accelerate it through the crisis. We've seen productivity improvements across a number of our projects because truck movements are more free in an uncongested city, and we are, trying to manage our projects a little bit more constructively in light of not having commuters running around. So, there is that capacity, and to your point, I mean, the critical signal in all of this is confidence. If the community can see governments getting on with their projects, despite now what will be, a crash in revenues, not only for the private sector, but of course government as well, then, that's the most important thing we can do. So, we've got at the moment, quite literally 130,000 jobs associated with transport in our projects, and we've kept them all going right through this whole disaster. And my intention, as we see an easing of the pandemic, is we actually try and very much deliver good, small, mid-sized, and the mega projects to which we talk. So, referring to, the shapers of the city in bygone eras, the key thing for me at this stage is we've done it before. 2011, we had to make some very tough decisions as to where to raise the finances to build these projects, and we used the government's balance sheet to do it with asset recycling. We're going to have to continue that, but we're also going to have to look at the cost of money. I mean, debt is manageable given the extraordinary low interest rates, and we've just got to do this sensibly. So, naturally we will look at everything in a pandemic world, but I think, we've got to keep the tens of thousands of jobs going in Western Sydney, and this is the way to do it.
Not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth on the day that the EIS, the Metro West came out. A couple of other quick ones. Does it up the ante on Parramatta Light Rail?
No,
or does this opportunity also allow you to think about things like trackless trams and other technology?
I've said all along. I know there's probably some people who are listening in on this conversation right now, but I'd say this to everybody. I mean, we're getting on with Parramatta Light Rail. First stage is now underway. In fact, the Carlingford line, I got told by the project manager that Carlingford line component of the project is actually 2 months ahead of schedule. They're now looking at how they can devise ways to improve the build through Eat Street because of what's happened with COVID. So the work's going on there. In terms of
stage two is obviously the
stage two. Yeah, so I mean, I understand the viewpoints of people in relation to stage two. I've said all along, the most important thing we can do to get on with that project is build the bridge between Melrose Park and Wentworth Point. That's the first point. Secondly, it would be, I think, irresponsible to not go and actually have a look at better ways to build things and mass transit. So, we are seeing some incredible examples where if you have standalone laneways for trackless trams, that's potentially an option. You've now got, out of Europe, lengthy articulated buses able to carry 200 people, fully electric. If they're in a standalone lane, you could potentially look at a whole raft of things. But
we would ask the Minister in supporting that concept, and we're very open, have been to that.
Yeah.
That you might also consider it being a loop too, and using coming maybe along the Victoria Road corridor and back to Parramatta Road corridor to open up the Auburn, Granville town centres, Auto Alley at Parramatta, that sort of thing. So I think that's an opportunity.
I think there's any number of options, but one of the requirements in relation to WestConnex in terms of planning was, of course, also the Parramatta Road corridor. So
we're still waiting on that one, yeah.
Yeah. So my sense is let's have a look. We've got some exciting proposals happening out of Liverpool in terms of trackless trams and direct connections to the airport. The innovation is showing electric, longer vehicles which can carry a lot of people and full automation. So, I'm not going to plough into that project and then end up, someone turning around in 3 years' time and saying, "Hey, Minister, we could have done it this way far more quickly and effectively." So we want to be able to do that. So that's that's the reality of this.
Let me go to two last quick questions before we go to our response panel and then come back to the punters. One, we're also meant to have had an EIS for the Greater West, the North-South Airport train out by now. It is not a state secret to know that Canberra and Macquarie Street have gone 15 rounds in call it robust negotiations over that train. Are we any closer to getting stations predicted or nominated on between St Mary's and the Aerotropolis? And secondly, there's a growing view that says that the one thing both governments tend to agree on is they want to go north with stage 2 rather than south. Just noting that Lindy Dietz from Camberdown City Council's on the response panel, and the people of Macarthur have sort of been let down ever since Whitlam promised them something in the early 70s. Should they have? Is that a done deal?
Look, I mean, yeah. Look, I mean, the bottom line is that this is a metro train for Western Sydney residents who live near the airport, and you know, this is to my very strong view. I mean, we've got the Commonwealth and the state about to go hard in building a metro train between St Mary's and the airport, and that includes the design of train stations at the airport. That has been the focus. You know, it's obviously a very big build cost-wise, but greenfield. And, you know, in terms of where you go next, I think it's fair to say, I mean, logically connecting into the southwest makes more sense in a way, but logic would also tell you can up the BCR and the value of the train line and the airport if you connect into the existing Northwest Metro. So it would be naive of governments not to explore the best option there for taxpayers and the people of Greater Western Sydney. But I've got to be honest with you, there's no decision point in relation to that. And, you know, I know that, again, it's an important time for stakeholders to be advocating their positions very strongly. But
let me throw a last one to you before we go to the panel. More about you personally. This is a period of massive transformation we're all going through with COVID-19. You had your own transformation a little earlier with the bushfires fairly dramatically. You spoke about politics won't be business as usual ever again, and I think the rest of the country and the world's catching up with their own trauma in more recent times. Notwithstanding, I assume you're not going to throw your hat in as the Liberal candidate for Ed Monero if the seat becomes available with you and Barrett, you know, levelling off at a tilt at Canberra. How do you see for you going ahead politics not as usual? How does it manifest for the rest of us when a trailblazer like you has really belled the cat on politics as usual? What do the rest of us expect?
I mean, I hope really?
You have.
Yeah. Look, it's nice hearing.
I think we're ready for change.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think we've got a broken community. You know, I've still got people in the local area living in caravans on their blocks and tents on their blocks. We're about to get the first major sort of cold snap of the year coming through. So it's been horrible. I mean, you can't have a situation where with COVID, people haven't been able to get to in their cars and go and check on people because they don't want to spread the disease. And, you know, what overlays that, and I said this yesterday, everyone just needs to take a chill pill on Ed Monero and just let Mike Kelly with dignity make a statement about himself. I mean, he's been a good local MP, good guy. I've never argued with him in 13 years, you know, and I'm Liberal, he's Labor, but he's done it well.
You tend to argue with those federal libs a bit.
Yeah, but that's to stake out a position in the interest of the state. I mean, you know, state before politics in that sense. But I do think in terms of the need for dynamic shift, I think the biggest problem at the moment is politics is not attracting good people. You know, it's become a plaything of factions. It's become a plaything on both sides. It's all about self-advancement. So I think that's been the problem. I think what's been heartening through the COVID thing is largely there has been a degree of bipartisanship in the approach. There's been odd days where there's been outbursts of stupidity, but
there's civility has reigned as well.
Correct. And when people are trying to survive, the last thing they want to do is turn on the television and see typically middle-aged blokes go and hell for leather. So my sense out of it is politics. The most important thing that can happen is people need to connect emotionally. They need to respect each other in terms of their circumstances. I had to drive to Sydney the last 2 days, and I drove past a couple of Centrelink offices on the way home, and there was queues out the front door. Now, imagine how those poor people who've lost everything through no fault of their own, because of a virus, which no one can see. I mean, with the fires, you could physically and tangibly feel it, see it. Yeah. With the virus, it's around us, but we can't see it. And it's until we get sick, then it becomes a very real problem. So I just think politicians need to show a degree of maturity that the rest of the community expects from them in terms of their advocacy and doing this well. And we've got to embrace each other a bit more. I mean, I have been incredibly complimentary of the RTBU over the recent weeks because they've done a brilliant job. Before the fires, I probably would have been a little bit more like
there's transformation, and Andrew Constance embracing industrial movement is there.
Well, yeah, but why would I? I mean, yeah, but why wouldn't I praise David Babineau and Alex Glassons for the way that they have worked with the agency to get people and make people safe? And we've got a long way to go. I mean, what we do and everybody in on this call, we've all got a responsibility to see where we can drive the jobs growth, not expend energies in the wrong way, and go from there.